The carriage wheels clattered against the cobblestones as Raven pressed his face to the window, watching the sprawling city of Faelora unfold before him. After 18 years in the remote northern village of Thornwick, the capital seemed impossibly vast, its towers reaching toward the gray sky like fingers clawing at the heavens. Steam rose from countless chimneys, and the scent of magic hung heavy in the air, making his Omega senses tingle with nervous energy. His leather satchel contained everything he owned: a few changes of clothes, his father's old alchemy journal, and the acceptance letter from the Guild of Alchemists that had changed his life forever. The parchment was worn from countless readings, but the words still made his heart race. Your application for the apprentice position has been accepted. Report to Guild Master Theron at the first bell of autumn. The carriage lurched to a stop outside the guild's imposing stone facade. Raven paid the driver with trembling hands and stood before the massive oak doors, each carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when he wasn't looking directly at them. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the entrance and into his new life. The Guild of Alchemists was a labyrinth of corridors lined with shelves upon shelves of bubbling potions, glowing crystals, and books bound in leather so old it had turned black. The air hummed with magical energy, and Raven could smell the metallic tang of blood magic mixing with the earthier sense of herb lore and transmutation. His Omega nature made him more sensitive to these magical currents, and he found himself slightly overwhelmed by the intensity. Guild Master Theron was a stern-faced man in his 50s, his graying beard stained with alchemical residue. He looked Raven up and down with calculating eyes before nodding curtly. So you're the northern boy. Your test scores were impressive, I'll give you that. Blood magic isn't something most Omegas can handle, but your father's journals suggest you have the aptitude for it. Raven straightened his shoulders. I won't disappoint you, sir. We'll see about that. Your quarters are on the 3rd floor, and your training begins tomorrow at dawn. Don't be late. Theron turned away, then paused. And Raven? Stay away from the restricted sections until you're ready. Some knowledge can kill you if you're not prepared for it. The next few days passed in a blur of studying ancient texts, learning to identify cursed artifacts, and practicing basic transmutation spells. Raven threw himself into his work with desperate intensity, determined to prove himself worthy of the opportunity. His small room became a sanctuary filled with notes and diagrams, the walls covered with his attempts to decode the mysterious symbols that appeared throughout the guild's more dangerous texts. But it was the nights that called to him. After long days of study, he would venture out into the city's winding streets, seeking the quiet taverns and hidden corners where he could think without the constant hum of magic pressing against his consciousness. It was during one such evening that his life took an unexpected turn. The Moonlit Goblet was a tavern on the city's outskirts, frequented by traders and travelers rather than the guild's more prestigious members. The lighting was dim, the ale was cheap, and most importantly, it was quiet. Raven had claimed a corner table and was nursing a mug of bitter ale when he felt it, a presence that made his Omega instincts scream warnings. The man who entered was tall and elegant, moving with a predatory grace that seemed out of place in the rough tavern. His dark hair was pulled back in a style that spoke of nobility, and his clothes, while travel-worn, were clearly expensive. But it was the mark on his neck that caught Raven's attention, an intricate tattoo that seemed to shift and move in the flickering candlelight, resembling the sigil of an ancient clan he'd read about in forbidden texts. Their eyes met across the room, and Raven felt a jolt of recognition that made no sense. The stranger's gaze was intense, predatory, and tinged with something that might have been amusement. A slow smile spread across his lips, and Raven felt his Omega nature respond in ways that terrified him. Without thinking, he dropped his gaze and quickly left the tavern, his heart pounding as he fled into the night. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Guild Master Theron had been called away on urgent business, and a new temporary guild master would be taking over operations. The senior alchemists gathered in the main hall, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern as they waited for the announcement. When the doors opened, Raven's blood turned to ice. The man from the tavern strode into the hall with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Up close, Raven could see the otherworldly beauty that marked him as something more than human. the two sharp angles of his face, the way shadows seemed to bend around him, and those eyes that held depths no mortal gaze should possess. "I am Kairos Melzar," the stranger announced, his voice carrying an authority that made the very air tremble. "I will be serving as your guild master while Theron attends to external matters. I trust you will extend me the same courtesy you would show your regular master." The assembled alchemists murmured their assent, but Raven could only stare in shock. Kairos Melzar. He'd read that name in the restricted texts, in warnings about demons who had been banished from the mortal realm for crimes so severe they were spoken of only in whispers. And now that demon was standing before them, smiling with barely concealed amusement as his gaze swept the room. When those dark eyes found Raven's, the smile widened. "Some faces here seem familiar. Perhaps it's simply the welcoming nature of your guild, but I feel as though I've seen certain individuals before." Heat flooded Raven's cheeks, and he fought the urge to flee again. Instead, he forced himself to stand straight and meet that knowing gaze, even as his Omega instincts screamed at him to submit or run. Something flickered in Kairos's eyes, approval, perhaps, or interest, before he turned his attention to the other guild members. The days that followed were a careful dance of avoidance and confrontation. Kairos seemed to take particular interest in Raven's progress, assigning him tasks that were far beyond what a mere apprentice should be handling. Ancient demonic runes that hurt to look at directly, cursed artifacts that whispered seductive promises, and expeditions to the ruins of the Forgotten Twins, places where reality itself seemed thin and dangerous. Each assignment came with notes written in Kairos's elegant script, messages that walked the line between helpful instruction and subtle threat. "Remember to check the lock on the chest before opening. It might decide to make you its next meal. The symbols on the third page will try to burrow into your mind if you stare too long. Don't let them. Bring silver wire for the binding ritual. Iron will only make it angry." Raven found himself both terrified and fascinated by the challenges. His Omega nature made him sensitive to the magical currents surrounding the cursed objects, allowing him to sense dangers that others might miss. But it also made him vulnerable in ways he was only beginning to understand. Each successful completion of Kairos's tasks brought a nod of approval that sent confusing warmth through his chest. The other guild members began to notice the tension between them. Lia, the guild's herbalist, would give Raven concerned looks when she thought he wasn't watching. Jarek, the alpha blacksmith who forged their ritual implements, pulled him aside one day with a frown creasing his weathered face. "That demon's got his eye on you, boy," Jarek warned, his voice low and urgent. "I've seen his kind before. They don't take interest in Omegas for wholesome reasons. You'd best watch yourself." But Raven found himself unable to heed the warning. Despite his fear, or perhaps because of it, he was drawn to Kairos like a moth to flame. The demon's presence filled every room he entered, and Raven caught himself looking for excuses to seek him out. He began leaving subtle changes in Kairos's ritual preparations. Nothing dangerous, just small alterations that would test the demon's attention to detail. The first time it happened, Kairos appeared at Raven's workstation with a raised eyebrow and a knowing smile. "Interesting choice, substituting phoenix ash for dragon scale. Were you testing my knowledge of transmutation principles? Or simply trying to see if I'd notice?" "I wanted to see if you were paying attention," Raven replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the way his heart raced. "Oh, I'm always paying attention where you're concerned." The words were spoken softly, but they carried a weight that made Raven's breath catch. "The question is, what exactly are you trying to tell me?" Their Cold War of spell components and magical modifications continued for weeks. Kairos would assign increasingly complex tasks, and Raven would find subtle ways to alter or improve upon the methods suggested. It became a game of intellectual chess, each move carefully calculated to provoke a response from the other. The game changed when they were sent on an expedition to the Arfal Forest, a region where the barriers between realms were thin and dangerous creatures roamed freely. The mission was to collect samples of shadowmoss, a rare ingredient that grew only in places touched by otherworldly magic. The team consisted of Raven, Kairos, and two senior alchemists who seemed nervous about venturing into such dangerous territory. It was in the forest that they met Seraphim. The attack came without warning. One moment they were carefully gathering samples from a grove of twisted trees. The next they were surrounded by hell spawns, creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and shadow, with glowing red eyes and claws that could tear through steel. The senior alchemists fell back in panic, their defensive spells proving woefully inadequate against the otherworldly predators. Raven found himself separated from the group, backed against a massive oak tree as three of the creatures advanced on him. His omega nature made him a tempting target, and he could smell their hunger as they circled closer. Just as the largest of the beasts prepared to lunge, a blur of silver and black crashed into it from the side. The werewolf who had come to his rescue was magnificent, tall and powerful, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, dispatching the hell spawns with claws and teeth that seemed to burn with their own inner light. Within moments, the creatures were nothing but smoking remains on the forest floor. "You're unhurt." The werewolf's voice was deep and reassuring, though Raven could detect the underlying growl that marked him as an alpha. "Those things are drawn to omega scent. You shouldn't be out here without proper protection." "I'm fine, thanks to you," Raven managed, still shaken by the encounter. "I'm Raven, from the Guild of Alchemists. Are you from one of the local packs?" The werewolf smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Seraphim of the Pale Moon Clan. I serve as a messenger between the packs and the guild when necessary. I was in the area when I caught your scent and heard the commotion." Before Raven could respond, Kyrus appeared through the trees, his expression thunderous. The demon's eyes swept over the scene, the destroyed hell spawns, Seraphim standing protectively near Raven, and the obvious signs of a battle he had arrived too late to participate in. "How fortunate that you were nearby," Kyrus said, his voice carrying an edge that made both Raven and Seraphim tense. "Though I'm curious why a messenger from the Pale Moon Clan would be so deep in neutral territory." Seraphim's expression didn't change, but Raven could sense the subtle shift in his posture. "I go where my duties take me, demon. Right now, those duties include ensuring the safety of guild members who venture into dangerous areas." The tension between the two alphas was palpable, and Raven found himself caught in the middle of something he didn't fully understand. There was history here, old rivalries and territorial disputes that went far beyond a simple chance encounter in the forest. "How thoughtful of you," Kyrus replied, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Though I'm perfectly capable of protecting my own people." "Your people?" Seraphim's eyebrows rose. "I was under the impression that Raven was a guild apprentice, not a demon's claimed omega." The words hit like a physical blow, and Raven felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger. "I'm not anyone's claimed anything," he snapped, his voice carrying more heat than he intended. "I can take care of myself." Both alphas turned to look at him, and Raven realized he'd made a mistake. The attention of two powerful predators focused on him made his omega instincts scream warnings, but he forced himself to stand his ground. He was tired of being seen as weak, as something to be protected or claimed or fought over. "Of course you can," Kyrus said smoothly, though his eyes never left Seraphim. "Though perhaps in the future, we should ensure you have proper backup when venturing into dangerous territory." Seraphim nodded slowly. "I could arrange for pack protection during future expeditions. The Pale Moon Clan has extensive knowledge of the forest regions." "How generous," Kyrus replied, "though I'm sure the guild can manage its own security arrangements." The remainder of the expedition passed in tense silence, with Seraphim accompanying them as an unofficial guard. Raven found himself hyper-aware of both alphas, the way they moved around each other like circling predators, the careful politeness that barely concealed their mutual antagonism. And underneath it all, he sensed something else, a growing interest from both of them that made his omega nature respond in confusing ways. Back at the guild, Seraphim was officially assigned as a liaison between the alchemists and the werewolf clans. He took up residence in the guild's guest quarters, and his presence added a new dynamic to the already complex relationship between Raven and Kyrus. Where Kairos was sharp edges and dangerous games, Seraphim was steady warmth and protective instincts. He would appear at Raven's side during difficult experiments, offering quiet support and gentle guidance. He brought Raven tea when he worked late into the night, and his presence made the Omega feel safe in ways he hadn't experienced since childhood. But it was Kairos who made his heart race, who challenged him intellectually and pushed him to exceed his own limitations. The demon's attention was intoxicating especially when, it came wrapped in danger and uncertainty. The three of them fell into a complex dance of attraction and competition. Seraphim would offer to escort Raven to the market, and Kairos would suddenly remember urgent guild business that required the Omega's immediate attention. Kairos would assign Raven challenging research projects that kept him busy late into the evening, and Seraphim would appear with dinner and concerned inquiries about his well-being. Through it all, Raven found himself torn between gratitude for Seraphim's steadfast support and helpless attraction to Kairos's dangerous charisma. The werewolf represented everything safe and stable, while the demon embodied everything wild and uncertain. And caught between them, Raven began to understand that his choice would determine not just his own fate, but the delicate balance of power that existed between their peoples. The breaking point came during the Festival of Shadows, when the barriers between realms grew thin and magical energies reached their peak. The guild traditionally used this time for their most important rituals, and Kairos had assigned Raven to assist with a complex purification ceremony. The ritual required the Omega to work closely with cursed artifacts, using his natural sensitivity to magical currents to cleanse them of malevolent influence. It was during the preparation for this ritual that Seraphim made his discovery. He had been helping Raven organize the necessary components when moonlight streaming through the window revealed something that made the werewolf's breath catch. There, on Raven's shoulder, was a mark that should not have existed, a scarred sigil that pulsed with faint malevolent energy. "Raven," Seraphim's voice was tight with concern. "What is that mark?" Raven's hand flew to his shoulder, covering the old scar with trembling fingers. "It's nothing, just an old injury." But Seraphim's enhanced senses could detect the lies, and his expression grew troubled. "That's not a natural scar. It's a binding mark. Someone has claimed you before." The words hit Raven like a physical blow, bringing back memories he'd tried desperately to forget. The alchemist who had taken him in after his parents' death, who had seemed so kind and generous until the night he'd revealed his true intentions. The ritual circle drawn in blood, the burning pain as the mark was carved into his flesh, the months of being used as a living source of power to fuel the older man's experiments. "I escaped," Raven whispered, his voice broken. "I thought I was free." Seraphim's eyes blazed with protective fury. "Who did this to you? Where is he now?" "Dead," Raven said flatly. "The binding consumed him eventually. That's what happens when you try to steal power from an unwilling source. But the mark, it never faded completely." The werewolf reached out as if to touch the scar, then stopped himself. "Does Kairos know about this?" "No one knows," Raven said quickly. "And I want to keep it that way. Please, Seraphim, don't tell anyone." But even as he spoke, Raven knew it was too late. The scent of their emotional distress had carried through the guild's corridors, and Kairos appeared in the doorway with an expression of dark curiosity. "How interesting," the demon said, his voice carrying a dangerous undertone. "What secrets are we keeping in the moonlight?" Seraphim moved instinctively between Kairos and Raven, his protective instincts overriding diplomatic considerations. "Nothing that concerns you, demon." Kairos's smile was sharp as a blade. "Everything about my apprentice concerns me, wolf, especially when he's obviously distressed." "Your apprentice?" Seraphim's voice carried a warning growl. "Or your target?" The accusation hung in the air like a curse, and Raven felt something break inside him. All his fears, all his doubts about Kairos's true intentions, came rushing back in a wave of panic and despair. The demon's interest in him, the challenging assignments, the way those dark eyes seemed to see straight through to his soul. Had it all been manipulation? Had he been walking willingly into another trap? "Is that what this is?" Raven asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Another binding? Another claim? Kyrus's expression shifted, surprise and something that might have been hurt flickering across his features. Raven, you can't possibly think. I think I've been a fool, Raven interrupted, backing away from both alphas. I think I let myself believe that someone like you could actually care about someone like me. But you're just like him, aren't you? You want to use me, drain me, take whatever power I have to offer. That's not true, Kyrus said, and for the first time since Raven had known him, the demon's composure cracked. I would never. You're a demon, Raven said, the words cutting like knives. It's what you do. It's what you are. The pain that flashed across Kyrus's face was so raw, so genuine, that Raven almost regretted the words. But his own hurt was too fresh, too overwhelming, and he couldn't bring himself to take them back. I see, Kyrus said quietly, his mask of control sliding back into place. Well then, I suppose there's nothing more to discuss. He turned and walked away, leaving Raven alone with Seraphim and the weight of his own accusations. The werewolf moved closer, offering wordless comfort, but Raven felt hollow inside. He had driven away the demon who had challenged and frustrated and fascinated him, and now he was left with only the safety of Seraphim's presence and the echo of his own cruel words. The next few days passed in a haze of regret and confusion. Kyrus maintained his duties as guild master, but his interactions with Raven became coldly professional. The challenging assignments stopped, replaced by routine tasks that any apprentice could handle. The notes disappeared, as did the knowing smiles and subtle games that had become such a part of their relationship. Seraphim tried to fill the void with his steady presence, offering comfort and support that Raven knew he should appreciate. The werewolf was everything any Omega could want. Strong, protective, gentle, and genuinely caring. But Raven found himself missing the sharp edges of his interactions with Kyrus, the intellectual challenges and dangerous games that had made him feel alive in ways he'd never experienced before. It was during this period of emotional turmoil that the revelation came. Elder Theron returned from his journey with news that shattered everything Raven thought he knew about his situation. The old guild master called him into his private study, his expression grave as he spread ancient texts across his desk. I've been researching your bloodline, Theron said without preamble. Your father's journals hinted at it, but I needed to be certain before I spoke with you. Raven, you're not just any Omega. You're what the old texts call a blood Omega, one of the rare few who can break demonic bindings and curses. Raven stared at the texts, his mind struggling to process the information. I don't understand. What does that mean? It means, Theron continued, that your blood, freely given, can sever the darkest of magical bonds. It's why you were able to escape your previous captor. The binding he placed on you was ultimately weaker than your own power. And it's why Kyrus Melzar is here. The words hit Raven like a physical blow. He's here because of me? The demon lord has been bound by a curse for 50 years, Theron explained. Banished from his realm, stripped of much of his power, forced to exist in a weakened state. Only a blood Omega can break such a binding. The guild elders have been negotiating with him for months. Your freedom in exchange for his restoration. Raven felt the world tilt around him. My freedom. The ritual requires a willing participant, Theron said carefully. But the elders believe it's for the greater good. A restored demon lord as an ally rather than an enemy, magical knowledge that could benefit all our people. They see it as a necessary sacrifice. A sacrifice? Raven repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. That's what I am to them. To all of you. The choice is still yours, Theron said, but his tone suggested otherwise. But consider the alternatives. Kyrus's curse is tied to his banishment. If it's not broken, he'll eventually fade from existence entirely. And with him will go any chance of alliance between our peoples. The implications were staggering. Everything Raven had believed about his relationship with Kyrus, every moment of attraction and connection, had been built on a lie. The demon hadn't been interested in him as a person. He'd been interested in him as a solution to his own problems. That night, Unable to face the weight of expectations and betrayal, Raven made a decision that would change everything. He gathered his few belongings and slipped out of the guild under cover of darkness, fleeing into the city's winding streets with no destination in mind except away. He found refuge in the ruins of an old temple on the city's outskirts, a place where the homeless and desperate came to hide from the world. The ancient stones were covered in moss and decay, but they offered shelter from the wind and rain. Raven huddled in a corner, wrapped in his cloak, and tried to make sense of the chaos his life had become. It was there that they found him. Seraphim arrived first, his werewolf senses leading him straight to Raven's hiding place. The Alpha's expression was filled with concern and relief as he approached the shivering Omega. "Everyone's been looking for you," Seraphim said gently. "You can't just disappear like that. People were worried. People were worried about losing their bargaining chip," Raven replied bitterly. "I know about the negotiations, about what they want from me. I'm just a tool to them, something to be used and discarded." "That's not true," Seraphim protested. "At least not for everyone. You matter to me, Raven, not because of what you can do, but because of who you are." The werewolf's sincerity was painful to witness, and Raven felt tears prick at his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I know you care about me, but I can't do this anymore. I can't be what everyone wants me to be." "Then don't be," another voice said from the temple entrance. Kairos stepped out of the shadows, his expression unreadable. "Don't be anything except what you choose to be." Raven's heart clenched at the sight of the demon, all his confused feelings rushing back in a wave of longing and fear. "You came here to convince me to go through with the ritual." "I came here to tell you that the ritual is off," Kairos said, moving closer with careful, non-threatening steps. "I've released the guild from any obligation to provide your services. You're free to make your own choices. But your curse will fade with time," Kairos interrupted. "Yes, I'll eventually cease to exist in this realm. But I'd rather face that fate than force you into something you don't want." The admission hung in the air between them, and Raven felt something shift in his understanding of the demon's character. "Why? Why would you give up your chance at freedom?" Kairos was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the temple's broken roof. "Because I realized that what I felt for you was more than just gratitude for a potential salvation. Because you were right when you accused me of being like your previous captor. I was using you even if my methods were different. And because I love you too much to see you sacrifice yourself for my sake." The words hit Raven like a lightning strike, illuminating truths he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. "You love me. Desperately," Kairos admitted. "Completely. Against all reason and self-preservation. I love your intelligence, your courage, your stubborn refusal to be cowed by power. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see through my masks to the truth beneath. I love you, Raven, not what you can do for me." Seraphim stepped forward, his expression pained but determined. "As do I," he said quietly. "I love your gentleness, your compassion, your strength in the face of adversity. You're not a tool or a weapon or a sacrifice. You're a person deserving of love and respect and choice." Raven looked between them, these two powerful beings who had somehow found their way into his heart despite all his walls and defenses. Seraphim represented everything safe and stable, a future free from the dangers and uncertainties that had plagued his past. Kairos embodied everything wild and passionate, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species and realm. "I don't know how to choose," Raven whispered, his voice breaking. "I care about both of you, but in different ways. Seraphim, you're my peace, my safe harbor. But Kairos, you're my storm, my challenge, my growth. How do I choose between safety and passion?" "You don't have to choose right now," Seraphim said, though the words clearly cost him. "Take time to think, to feel, to understand what you really want." "But I do have to choose," Raven said, looking directly at Kairos. "Because if I don't perform the ritual, you'll die. And I can't live with that on my conscience." Kairos's expression grew fierce. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me." I'd rather face oblivion than see you trapped in another binding. What if it's not a sacrifice? Raven asked, an idea beginning to form in his mind. What if it's a choice? What if I perform the ritual not because I'm forced to, but because I want to? Both alphas stared at him, and Raven felt a sense of clarity settling over him like a warm blanket. I've been running from my power, from what I am, because I associated it with being used and abused. But my power is part of me, and I can choose how to use it. I can choose who deserves my help and who doesn't. Raven, Kairos said softly, you don't understand what you're suggesting. The ritual will bind us together permanently. There's no undoing it once it's begun. I know, Raven replied, his voice growing stronger with each word. And I know that I've been afraid of you because you represent everything I thought I couldn't have. A love that's passionate and dangerous and completely consuming. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting my past dictate my future. He turned to Seraphim, his heart breaking at the pain in the werewolf's eyes. I love you, he said simply. I love your kindness and your strength and your unwavering support. You showed me that I deserve to be cherished, that I'm worth protecting. But what I feel for Kairos, it's different. It's terrifying and exhilarating and completely irrational. It's the kind of love that changes you, that makes you willing to risk everything for the chance to be with someone. Seraphim nodded slowly, his expression sad but understanding. I knew, he said quietly. I could smell it on you, the way your scent changed when he was near. I hoped, but I knew. I'm sorry, Raven whispered, tears streaming down his face. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't, Seraphim assured him. You can't help who you love. And honestly, I'd rather see you happy with him than safe but miserable with me. The werewolf approached Kairos, and for a moment Raven thought they might fight. Instead, Seraphim extended his hand in a gesture of grudging respect. Take care of him, demon. He's precious, and he deserves better than either of us probably can give him. Kairos clasped the offered hand, his expression solemn. I'll spend eternity trying to be worthy of him. See that you do, Seraphim replied. Then, with a last look at Raven, he transformed into his wolf form and disappeared into the night, leaving the Omega alone with his choice. Kairos approached slowly, as if afraid that sudden movement might spook Raven into changing his mind. Are you certain about this? The ritual will change both of us permanently. We'll be bound together in ways that go beyond the physical. I'm certain, Raven said, reaching out to take the demon's hand. I'm tired of being afraid of what I want. I want you, Kairos, all of you, including the danger and the uncertainty and the possibility that we might destroy each other. We won't destroy each other, Kairos said, his voice rough with emotion. We'll build something new, something that's never existed before. A love that transcends the boundaries between our peoples. A bond that proves cooperation is possible. The ritual took place 3 days later, in the guild's most sacred chamber. The room was circular, with walls covered in ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Candles burned at regular intervals, their flames dancing in patterns that defied natural physics. At the center of the room was a circle of power, inscribed in silver and sealed with protective wards. Raven knelt in the center of the circle, wearing simple white robes that left his arms bare. The old scar on his shoulder was visible, a reminder of his past trauma and his decision to overcome it. Kairos knelt opposite him, his own skin marked with the dark symbols that represented his binding curse. The ritual itself was surprisingly simple. Raven placed his hands on Kairos's shoulders, feeling the demon's power stirring beneath his skin. He closed his eyes and reached deep within himself, finding the source of his blood Omega abilities. When he opened his eyes again, they were glowing with soft blue light. Are you ready? Raven asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been ready for 50 years, Kairos replied, his own eyes reflecting the candlelight like mirrors. Raven leaned forward and pressed his lips to Kairos's throat, directly over the cursed marks. The demon's skin was hot beneath his mouth, and he could taste the otherworldly power that flowed through his veins. As he bit down gently, drawing a few drops of blood. He felt his own power surge outward. The binding curse fought against his influence, sending waves of pain through both their bodies. But Raven held on, pouring his will and his love into the magic, determined to free the man he had chosen above all others. Around them, the circle of power blazed with light, and the ancient symbols on the walls began to spin and shift. When the curse finally broke, the release of energy was like an explosion. Raven was thrown backward, his vision going white as magical backlash crashed over him. When his sight cleared, he found himself staring up at Kairos, who was leaning over him with an expression of wonder and concern. "Are you all right?" the demon asked, his voice different now, deeper, more resonant, filled with the power that had been returned to him. "I'm perfect," Raven whispered, reaching up to touch Kairos's face. The demon's features were sharper now, more defined, as if he had been a faded photograph that had suddenly come into focus. "How do you feel?" "Free," Kairos said, his smile brilliant with joy. "Whole, complete, like I've been holding my breath for 50 years and can finally exhale." As they kissed, Raven felt the bond settling into place between them. Not the forced connection of his previous binding, but something chosen and mutual and unbreakable. He could feel Kairos's emotions as if they were his own, could sense the depth of the demon's love and devotion. "No regrets?" Kairos asked against his lips. "None," Raven replied firmly. "This is exactly where I want to be." The months that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery. Raven's relationship with Kairos deepened beyond anything he had imagined possible. The demon courted him with an intensity that was both thrilling and overwhelming, showering him with gifts and attention that made his Omega nature sing with satisfaction. But it was the quiet moments that Raven treasured most. The evenings spent reading together in Kairos's expanded quarters, the demon's head in his lap as he ran his fingers through dark hair. The mornings when he woke to find Kairos watching him with such love and wonder that it took his breath away. The way their powers complemented each other, creating magic that was stronger than either could achieve alone. The guild, meanwhile, had to adjust to having a fully powered demon lord in their midst. Kairos's presence changed the very atmosphere of the place, making the magical currents stronger and more focused. He brought knowledge and techniques that advanced their understanding of alchemy by decades, and his diplomatic connections opened doors that had been closed to them for generations. But perhaps the most significant change was in Raven himself. The shy, frightened Omega who had arrived from the northern village was gone, replaced by someone confident and powerful and unafraid to claim his place in the world. He completed his apprenticeship with honors and was immediately offered a position as a full guild member, specializing in the intersection of blood magic and demonic studies. The announcement of their formal bonding ceremony sent shockwaves through both the magical and mundane worlds. An Omega and a demon lord, bound not by political necessity but by genuine love, represented something unprecedented in the history of their peoples. Some viewed it as a hopeful sign of cooperation between species, while others saw it as a dangerous precedent that threatened traditional power structures. The ceremony itself was held in the guild's Great Hall, with representatives from across the magical spectrum in attendance. Seraphim was there, representing the werewolf clans, his expression solemn but genuinely happy for them. The various demon courts sent emissaries, as did the elemental councils and the Shadow Realm nobility. Raven wore robes of deep blue silk that brought out the color of his eyes, while Kairos was resplendent in black velvet trimmed with silver. The bonding ritual was a blend of traditions from both their peoples, creating something entirely new and uniquely theirs. As they exchanged vows, Raven felt the weight of history settling around them. They were writing a new chapter in the relationship between their species, proving that love could indeed conquer the prejudices and fears that had kept their peoples apart for so long. "I choose you," Raven said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Not because fate demands it, not because politics requires it, but because my heart knows no other path. You are my storm and my calm, my challenge and my comfort, my forever and always." "I choose you," Kairos replied, his own voice rough with emotion. "You are my redemption, my salvation, my proof that even the darkest soul can find light." You saw past what I was to who I could become, and for that gift, I will love you until the stars burn out. The magical energy that surrounded them as they kissed was visible to everyone present, a swirling aurora of power that spoke of a bond deeper than mere ceremony. When they finally broke apart, the hall erupted in applause and cheers, the sound echoing off the stone walls like thunder. Later, as they stood together on the balcony of their new shared quarters, watching the sun set over the city that had become their home, Raven reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be bonded to a demon lord, I'd have thought they were insane, he said, leaning into Kyrus's embrace. If someone had told me I'd find love with a blood omega who challenged me at every turn, I'd have laughed, Kyrus replied, pressing a kiss to the top of Raven's head. But here we are. Here we are, Raven agreed, looking out over the city lights that twinkled like earthbound stars. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not even the parts where you thought I was trying to use you? Kyrus asked, his tone teasing but with an underlying note of old pain. Especially not those parts, Raven said firmly. They taught me to value myself, to demand more than mere survival. They led me to you, and that makes them worth everything. As they stood together in the gathering darkness, Raven felt a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. He had found his place in the world, his purpose, his love. The frightened Omega who had fled his northern village was gone, replaced by someone confident and powerful and unafraid to claim his destiny. The future stretched out before them, filled with possibilities and challenges and adventures yet to come. There would be those who opposed their union, who saw it as a threat to the established order. There would be political complications and magical dangers and all the complexities that came with being public figures in a world still learning to accept change. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the love that burned between them, the bond that connected their souls, and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. I love you, Raven whispered into the night air, the words carrying on the wind like a promise. And I love you, Kyrus replied, his voice warm and sure and eternal. Forever and always, my beautiful Omega, my heart, my soul, my everything. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Raven smiled and closed his eyes, secure in the knowledge that he had found his happily ever after. Not in the safety of Seraphim's protection, but in the wild, passionate, completely consuming love of the demon who had seen his soul and claimed it as his own. The story of the Blood Omega and the Demon Lord would be told for generations. A tale of love conquering fear, of choice triumphing over obligation, of two souls finding their perfect match in the most unlikely of circumstances. And at the heart of it all was the simple truth that love, real love, was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any leap of faith. In the end, Raven had made his choice, and it had led him exactly where he belonged.